My sweet neighbor showed me how to sew a bowl cozy in minutes. And guess what? No pattern needed. All you need are two fabric squares and a simple technique called a dart. Now, it's very important for safety that you use 100% cotton fabric and 100% cotton batting like this Wrap and Zap that is labeled microwave safe. You also need to use 100% cotton thread, which I have in my sewing machine. Now here is the first cozy that I made with instructions from my neighbor, and you can see it's just a couple of squares with the darts added to give it the bowl shape. It is reversible, so you could use two different fabrics if you want. Now this one is made with 12-inch squares, and I'll leave the measurements for the darts in the description. For today's cozy, I am using 10-inch squares, which are perfect for my bowls that are about 6 inches in diameter. These square quilting rulers are perfect for projects like this to get a nice even cut. And I always like to add a little bit to my measurement when cutting on the selvage edge. So you can see there's a little extra outside the 10 inches, and then I'll turn it to the straight side that I just cut and cut off that excess. So here are our two fabric squares, and for the batting we're going to cut a square that is 1/2 inch smaller than the fabric at 9.5 inches. This is so the seam isn't bulky when we're sewing it, and we're only sewing on the fabric initially. So you'll see here in a second, once I layer the batting on top of the fabric, it'll leave about a 1/4 inch edge all the way around. Now we're gonna set one piece of fabric aside and take the other one, wrong side facing up, and place the batting in the center with even spacing all around. Then pin along each side of the square. Now we're going to take a ruler or whatever straight edge you have, and we're going to make a mark from corner to corner. You can use chalk or fabric marking pen, whatever you have. I'm just using my bone folder tool to make a crease, which I can see, and you probably can't see it on the screen, but it does make a visible crease that I will sew along. So essentially we're just making a big X across the square, one line from corner to corner on each side. And we're going to sew along those lines, and this just tacks that batting into place with the fabric. I'm starting at the edge of the batting here, not at the edge of the fabric, and remember to backstitch at the start and finish of your stitch. And we are just sewing a straight stitch along that line that we created. So now that we have that big X sewn, it's time for the secret sauce, the darts. A dart is just an angled fold of fabric that is stitched to remove extra material and create a 3D shape. So this is a dart right here. And that's what it will look like when it's all done. So we are going to add 4 darts, one on each side of the square. So fold the square in half to create a rectangle, match up the corners and clip them in place, and make sure everything is smoothed out. Now we're going to take a ruler and measure on the folded edge 1 inch from the edge and make a mark right at the top of the batting. Then measure 2¼ inches from that first mark we made, add an angle toward the folded edge, and mark a line along that angle. That will be our dart stitch line. And you can put a pin in place just to keep that fold secure. And I'm going to show you one more time how to measure this. We're going 1 inch from the folded edge, and then from that point that we marked, 2¼ inches angled toward that folded line and make a line. So essentially we're creating a half triangle that we're going to stitch. So we are just going to stitch right on that line. Again, I'm starting at the batting edge, not at the fabric edge, and back stitching to start and at the end. And here is our first dart. Now I did get a little pleat along one side of this one, so that's why it's important to smooth everything out, but it's not a huge deal with this fabric. Now we are going to repeat this same step 3 more times to create those 4 darts in this square. Now, when measuring for the next 2 darts, just be sure to match up those corners on each side. You can see I'm smoothing out the fabric in the middle there where the fold is going to be, and just make sure the corners match up nicely so that the folded edge is nice and flat. And then go ahead and pin the corners in place and flatten that side out so you can make your measurements for the darts. So now that we have all 4 darts done, we need to follow these same steps one more time for that second fabric square. So in total, we'll make 8 darts for this project. Now you can add the X on this square, but I decided not to. I just went ahead and made the darts. And then once we're all done, we'll put them together. So here's that second fabric square with all 4 darts. And before we connect these 2 pieces, we need to trim off that excess fabric that we created by making the darts. So I'm just going to use my pinking shears, and I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. And we are nearing the finish line, so let's open our 2 squares and place them right sides facing. And we need to match up all the darts and the corners. And you'll want to nest your seams where the darts are by facing one edge to the left and one to the right. Doesn't matter which one goes which way, you decide. This helps to reduce bulk in the seam and also helps the seam to lay flat once it's all finished. So clip all the way around, but on one side, leave an opening that's about 2 inches wide for turning the cozy right side out. So we'll start sewing at this corner and sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and end 2 inches before the start. Now here, because we have darts, we have essentially created another corner where as at a corner you have to pivot at an angle to keep that seam allowance. So we'll need to sew until we get right up to that stitch where we created the dart. Leave the needle down in the fabric and then lift the presser foot and turn the fabric, pivot until we have that edge lined up again with the 1/4 inch seam. So here we are back at the beginning. Don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and the end before the opening. And then before we turn this right side out, we are going to clip all the corners, being careful not to cut into our seam. And here you can see how nicely those darts are nested together, so we should not have any puckering at these corners. Now let's go ahead and turn this out, and we're going to poke out all the corners so they're nice and square. And you don't need any fancy tools. I'm just using a Dollar Tree scoring tool that works great, and I've been using it for a while. So go ahead and clip away any stray threads, and then we just need to fold that opening in to the 1/4 inch mark where to match that seam that we sewed. Then clip it in place, and we'll give the whole thing a good press before sewing a top stitch to close the opening. Again, we're going to sew all the way around, and don't forget to pivot at those darts. Now take a look at your masterpiece and go make some soup. Check the description box for the larger cozy dart measurements and watch the video on screen for another simple sewing project you can make today.